The wind was cold, and the sky was full of smoke. The ground was wet and broken with metal and glass. The battlefield was quiet, but not dead. The human named Cade moved slowly between the Rex's boots, making soft sounds in the mud. He held a small scanner in his hand, but it was not working well. The smoke was too thick, and the signals were mixed. He looked left, then right, then walked deeper into the fog. He did not speak. He did not call out. He just listened. There had been a fight here. A big one. Ships had crashed. Soldiers had burned. Machines had screamed. Cade had seen many battles, but this one felt strange. Something in the air made his skin feel tight and his chest heavy. He stepped over a broken wing and saw a helmet on the ground. It was not human. It was from the other side, sleek dark, with silver lines that still glowed weakly. He knelt down and picked it up. It was still warm. Someone had been here not long ago. Then he heard it soft like a breeze or a dream it came from. Behind a large piece of ship metal, twisted like paper. Cade turned and waited. He heard it again, a whisper, his name. No, not his name, just a voice calling low and weak. Help me, it said. He ran to the metal and pushed hard. It groaned, but moved slowly. Under his strength, under the metal, was a figure lying still in armor. She was not human. She was tall and slim. Her armor was cracked, her body broken but still breathing. The armor was dark green with sharp edges. It looked strong but also heavy, like a prison. Her face was covered by a mask, smooth, with no mouth, no eyes. Just glowing lines that blinked like they were dying. Her chest moved up and down slowly, like she was fighting for every breath. Cade leaned close and said, "Can you hear me?" Her head turned just a little. Her voice came again, soft like wind. "Take it off," she whispered. "Please, take off my armor." He froze. No one ever said that. No alien ever asked that. The armor was sacred to them. It was part of their soul. It was not something to touch, not something to remove, not unless you were one of them, or unless they were already dead. He looked around. The fog was thicker now. The sounds of machines came from far away. Maybe scouts, maybe drones, maybe something worse. He looked down at her again. She was still breathing, but slower now. Her hands were weak, and her fingers barely moved. He saw blood, dark and sticky, on the metal under her. He knew he did not have much time. He had to choose: help her or walk away. Cade reached for the edge of the armor near her neck. He found a small latch hidden under a layer of dust. He touched it, and it clicked once. He pulled gently, and a part of the armor slid back with a soft hiss. Steam rose from the gap, and her breathing eased just a little. Her chest moved faster now, like her lungs were waking up. Her fingers twitched, and she whispered again, "Thank you." He removed more of the armor carefully, slowly, his hands shaking. He had never done this before, never touched alien tech like this, not so close, not on a living body. The armor was warm inside, soft and lined with something that felt like cloth, but also metal. Her skin underneath was smooth and pale, almost glowing with strange markings, like lines of light moving under her skin. Cade looked at her face as he removed the helmet. Her eyes were closed, her lips slightly parted, her hair long and silver like threads of starlight. She looked peaceful but also sad, like someone who had seen too much too fast. He saw a mark on her neck, like a symbol, glowing faintly. It pulsed with each breath. She opened her eyes slowly and looked at him. Her eyes were bright blue, like the sky before a storm. She smiled weakly and said, "My name is Ellery." Then she closed her eyes again and whispered, "They will come. They will know I am unsealed." He asked, "Who will come?" But she did not answer. Her head dropped to the side, and her body went still. Cade checked her pulse. It was still there, but fading. He pulled her closer and wrapped her in his coat. He looked around. The fog was thicker now, but not silent anymore. Footsteps, heavy and fast, were coming from the west and from the north too. He had to move. He had to find shelter. He had to keep her alive. He lifted her gently in his arms and began to walk back into the fog, away from the sounds, away from the light. He did not know who she was, not really, but she had whispered to him, trusted him, and now something inside him told him he could not leave her behind, no matter what came next. The wind grew louder as Cade moved through the broken land, holding the strange alien girl close to his chest. Her skin felt too cold, and her breathing too soft, but he did not stop. His legs kept moving over cracked stone and burned earth. The fog wrapped around him, like a ghost, and every sound made him look back, but no one came. Not yet. The girl's armor was still warm against his arms, but the power inside it was fading fast, like the life she was trying to hold on to. He found a hollow place between two fallen machines and slipped inside. Crouching low, he laid her down on soft ash and placed his bag under her head. Her name still echoed in his mind. Ellery. He had never heard that name before. It sounded soft but strong, like wind blowing through metal. He touched the strange latch on her chest plate again, and it glowed for a moment before fading. He pulled the front piece of the armor open just a little, and light spilled out. It was not just armor, it was something More, the inside was lined with glowing fibers, like veins of light running in patterns. Her body connected to it in ways he did not understand. Her skin had marks glowing blue, and silver pulsing with each breath like living data flowing under her skin. She winced as he touched a piece near her shoulder, and he stopped afraid. He had hurt her, but she opened her eyes slowly and whispered, "You did it. You really did it." Cade asked her if she could move, but she shook her head slowly. "Not yet," she said. "The armor is part of me. Without it, I feel weak, but also free." He asked her what she meant, and she looked at him with tired eyes. Then spoke in a soft voice, "The armor holds more than my body. It holds my orders, my fears, my silence. I wore it. Since I was young, I never felt air. I never felt pain. I never felt anything at all, until now." He looked at her more closely now. Her skin seemed too smooth, too perfect, like it was never touched by time. Or whether she had no scars, no wrinkles, nothing but those glowing lines, and that strange light in her eyes. She reached up with shaking fingers and touched his face gently, then pulled back like the warmth had surprised her. He asked why she was alone in that wreck, and she smiled without joy. "They sent me to die," she said. "They sent me because I began to ask questions, because I stopped believing in the fight." Cade sat beside her and asked what kind of questions, and she said, "Why do we fight? Why do we burn worlds? Why do we wear armor so tight we forget who we are?" I wanted to speak, I wanted to feel, but they said that was weakness, so they sent me on a mission. I could not survive, but I did not die because you came. She closed her eyes again, and her breathing grew slow. He checked the armor again, looking for anything that might help inside a small compartment. He found a sphere glowing soft green with strange symbols. It pulsed like a heart, and when he touched it, a light blinked on Ilari. Opened her eyes again, and said, "You should not touch that. It is my memory core. It holds everything. My thoughts, my fears, my mission, my pain. If they know it is out, they will hunt you too." Cade stared at the sphere, then at her, and asked why she let him take off her armor. If it was so dangerous, she looked away, then back at him and said, "Because I was dying, and because your hands felt kind. No one ever touched me without anger before. No one ever looked at me and saw more than a soldier. Not until you." They sat there in the dark space, the only light from her armor, and the soft hum of her core. Outside, the fog moved like it was alive and far away. Something screamed a high sound, like metal twisting in fire. Cade looked toward the sound, and then back at Ilari. "We cannot stay here," he said. "They will come." She nodded and tried to sit up, her arms shaking, her breath sharp. "I must move," she said. "I must reach the signal tower. There is something I must send before they find me." Cade helped her up and wrapped his coat around her again. She leaned on him, her legs weak without the armor support. He could feel her warmth. Now faint, but there she looked up at him, and whispered again, "Thank you, not just for saving me, but for touching me, like I was real, like I mattered." His heart beat faster at her words, and he nodded, not sure what to say. They stepped out of the hollow together, and walked into the fog, each step slow and careful but strong. Something had changed, something deep and quiet, not just in her, but in him, too. He had gone there to search for signals. But he found a voice, a life, and a moment that would not fade, no matter how dark the fog became. The fog was thicker now, like a heavy blanket wrapped around the broken world, hiding everything except the soft sound of footsteps and breath. Cade moved slowly with Ellery, leaning on him, her legs shaking, and her voice low. They had walked past burned machines and shattered steel, through mud and ash and old bones. Now, they followed the faint path toward the old signal tower, far ahead, behind the mist. Cade could feel it like a shadow, pulling him forward, like hope wrapped in wires. Ilari held her side as she walked, her breathing shallow and her skin colder than before. The glowing lines under her skin had grown dim, and her armor core blinked slower now. Cade knew she was getting weaker, but she refused to stop. Not yet. Her voice was soft but clear. "They will come for me. They will track the moment my armor opened. They always know when one of us breaks." "Protocol?" He asked how they could track her, and she answered, "The armor has blood code sensors. If it is opened by force, it alerts the nearest hive unit and sends a warning across the network." Cade looked up at the sky, but saw only smoke, no stars, no sun, just endless gray. He tightened the grip on his weapon and listened. The wind carried a strange sound, like metal feet stepping in rhythm, like claws on glass. He stopped and held Elari close against a wall made of shipwreckage. They both stood still and silent. The sound grew louder, and then faded again, like something was hunting nearby but not sure where to strike. They waited in silence for many minutes, until Ilari whispered, "We should keep moving, but stay low. They will scan the open roads first." Cade nodded, and led her through a narrow path under broken beams, and cracked stone above them. Pieces of burned banners flapped in the wind, symbols of her people faded and torn. She looked away when she saw them, and Cade knew she still carried pain from what she had lost. They reached a small room half buried under rubble, and rested for a moment. Ilari sat against a wall, her hands shaking, her eyes closing again. Cade watched her, and pulled out a small water pod, offering it to her. She took it with both hands and drank slowly, then handed it back with a weak smile. "Thank you again," she said. "No one in my unit would have done this for me. They would have let me die, and reported it as a system fault," he said. "Maybe they were just scared," and she shook her head. "No, we are trained not to fear, only to obey, and I broke that code before Cade could respond." A high, sharp sound filled the air like a pulse wave, echoing through the metal. The wall beside them flickered with red light. A scanner beam passed by, just inches from their heads. Cade grabbed Ilari and pulled her down flat, his heart pounding in his chest. Ilari reached for his hand and squeezed it, her eyes wide. "They are here," she said. "Not drones, but seekers. They walk. They smell, they learn, and they do not stop until the target is taken or destroyed." Cade asked how many, and she whispered to maybe 3, but more will follow if they find us. "We need to run, but my legs will not hold much longer." Cade stood and looked at the far wall behind it. Was a service shaft that led toward the old data lines. He had seen maps of this area before, and remembered the tunnels under the signal tower. He bent down and helped Ilari to her feet. "We go now," he said, "or we never go at all." They moved quickly through the shaft, the metal echoing with each step behind them. The sharp sounds of seekers grew closer, more clear. They moved like wolves, sniffing the air, scanning every corner. Cade helped Ilari climb over a pipe and crawl through a narrow crack. Just before the shaft behind them lit up red with movement, one of the seekers stepped into view, tall, covered in black armor with glowing red eyes. It looked around slowly, then raised a claw and touched the floor, as if tasting the trail. Cade held his breath as he and Ilari crawled deeper into the darkness. The space got tighter and the air colder. Ilari whispered that she could feel the bond inside the armor, breaking her connection to the hive, fading her thoughts, becoming more her own, but also more painful. "It is like I was blind, and now I see. But the light burns," she said. He told her to hold on and that he would not let her fall again. They finally reached the end of the shaft and dropped down into a lower chamber, filled with old tech and broken lights. Cade sealed the door behind them using an old manual lever, and looked around. There was dust everywhere, but also signs of life. Someone had been here before, maybe years ago, maybe days. They found a bench and sat down. Ilari leaned her head against his shoulder, her breath soft against his neck. She looked up at him and said, "You could have left me, but you didn't." "Why?" Cade looked at her glowing eyes and answered, "Because you whispered. My hands changed your life, but your voice changed mine." They sat in silence as the world above hunted for them, unaware that something had already begun to change deep beneath the dust and the fear and the armor. Something new had started to grow, and neither of them would ever be the same again. The room was dark and quiet, but the silence felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. The walls were covered in wires and broken panels. Some lights blinked weakly, but most were dead. Cade helped Ilari sit on the old bench and checked the door again, making sure it was locked tight. Above them the seekers moved like shadows, sniffing for trails, scanning for signals, their claws tapping on the metal like hammers on bones. Ilari leaned back against the cold wall, her chest rising and falling with slow effort. Her skin still glowed faintly, but the color was fading. Her eyes closed for a moment, then opened again, and she looked at Cade with something new in her gaze. Not fear, not pain, but trust, deep quiet trust. She reached to her side and pressed a panel on what was left of her armor. The small piece clicked open, and inside was a strange object, glowing gently like a heart made of light. She pulled it out with shaking hands and held it between them. The glow lit her face, and Cade saw the lines in her skin shimmer softly, like stardust moving under glass. "This is the core," she said. "It holds more than memory. It holds command. It holds identity. If you hold this, you hold me." Cade looked at the object, unsure what to say, unsure if he should touch it, unsure if he was even allowed, but she placed it gently into his hands and said, "Now it is yours too." He felt a pulse inside the core, like it was alive, like it knew him. Now it showed images in his mind. Not clear, but fast faces, lights, fire, screams, then silence. He dropped it with a gasp, but she caught it before it hit the ground, and smiled gently. "That is only the surface," she said. "The armor does not protect, it controls. We are raised inside it, trained to obey, to fight, to forget pain and fear and even love. But I remembered. You made me remember." Cade sat beside her, heart pounding, thoughts racing. He asked why her people would do that. Why build armor that takes away what makes someone alive? And she said, "Because control is easier than freedom. Because soldiers who feel are soldiers who question, and questions break the machine. I asked too many, and now they want me erased, not just dead, but forgotten, as if I never was." She opened another piece of her armor and pulled out thin wires wrapped in soft cloth. She said, "These help with pain," and placed one near her. temple. The light in her eyes grew a little stronger, and her breath came easier. Cade watched and realized how much she had done just to reach this far, how much she had lost to be here with him. He felt something sharp in his chest, not pain, but something close to it. Ilari looked at him and said, "You do not understand what it means to touch armor. It is sacred, but it is also a prison. No human has ever touched it, and lived. No one has ever seen us like this, not even our own kind. We are not allowed to remove it until death, and yet you did with care, not force, and that has changed me, changed something deeper than flesh." She placed the core back inside the armor and sealed it, but the light stayed behind like a memory in the air. Cade stood and walked to a broken console, brushing off dust and ash. He found a screen that still worked, barely flickering but alive. He asked her what the signal tower was supposed to do, and she said it was built before the war to send peaceful messages between worlds. Now, it was lock use only for orders, but if she could reach the main room, she could send one final message. Cade said, "Then we will get there together." But Ilari looked unsure. She said, "I am not a soldier anymore. I am not even whole. Without the armor, I am weak and slow, and I cannot fight like this." Cade stepped close and said, "Maybe you were never meant to fight. Maybe you were meant to be seen, to be heard, to be free." She smiled, then the smallest smile, full of sadness and hope. She reached up and touched his face again, fingers soft and trembling. "Your hands changed me," she said. "They did not hurt, they did not take, they gave, and that is something I will never forget." Outside, the sound of metal claws returned louder, closer. Cade grabbed his gear and helped Ilari to her feet. She winced, but stood tall, her eyes glowing a little brighter. Her steps still slow but stronger than before. They moved to the far door and opened it into another tunnel, darker and deeper than the last. But Ilari did not stop, and neither did Cade. They walked side by side into the unknown shadows, dancing on the walls, the broken pieces of her armor still clinging to her frame. Like pieces of a past she was ready to leave behind, and as they moved, she whispered something soft, something almost lost to the wind. "I am not my armor anymore. I am still Ilari, and I want to live." The tunnel was narrow and cold, with walls made of old stone and rusted steel. The lights overhead flickered like stars, trying not to die. Each step echoed too loud in the silence, but Cade and Ilari kept moving slowly, carefully. Every sound around them felt like danger. Every breath felt borrowed and thin. Behind them the Seekers moved like machines, without mercy, eyes scanning heat. Trail's ears tuned to even the smallest whisper. Cade held Ilari close, helping her walk as she leaned on him. Her legs were shaking, but she said nothing, her pride too strong, her voice too soft. She focused on moving one step at a time, one breath at a time. Her armor was broken, her power fading, but something inside her still burned, small but bright. Cade could feel it every time he looked at her face, every time she whispered his name. The tunnel led to an old hatch covered in dust, and locked with a rusted lever. Cade pulled with all his strength, and the hatch groaned before it opened with a loud crack. Light spilled out from the other side, not bright but warm enough to show what lay ahead. An old chamber filled with pipes and screens, broken chairs and scattered tools, signs of life from long ago, and maybe something more. Ilari stepped inside, first her eyes scanning the room, then she froze. Her hand reached out and touched the wall. She whispered, "This place was built before the war. It was part of the peace chain. It sent messages to other colonies. Not orders, not weapons, just words. Then the war came and they locked it. They turned it into a bunker, and the messages stopped." Cade looked around and saw broken screens with old writing, faded, but still there. He touched one, and it lit up for a moment, then faded again. They moved deeper into the chamber, and found a console still working. Dim lights glowing around a large screen. Ilari sat in front of it, breathing heavy, her hands shaking as she touched the keys. "This is it," she said. "If I can unlock this, I can send the truth out to every linked node. I can show them what we lost. I can tell them who I am." Before she could finish, a sound came from behind. A heavy blast shook the floor, and dust fell from the ceiling. Cade turned fast, weapon in hand. The tunnel they came from was no longer empty. A figure stepped through, tall and wide-armored from head to toe, but moving slow. Its eyes burned red, and its voice sounded like metal grinding together. "Surrender the traitor," it said, "or be erased." Cade stood between Ilari and the figure, his voice calm and clear. "You will not take her. She is free now. She is not yours." The figure laughed a low, hard sound, and stepped forward. "You cannot protect her, human. She is broken. She is lost. She has no place now." Cade aimed his weapon and said, "Then, I will make a place for her right here, right now." The armored figure raised its arm and fired a blast that hit the wall near Cade, throwing sparks and smoke. Ilari shouted and pressed something on the console. A shield flickered up between them and the figure. The blast hit again, but the shield held. Cade pulled Ilari to her feet and ran toward another door on the far side of the chamber, but it was sealed tight. Hilary looked at the panel and said it needs a full core link. I can do it, but it will drain me, Cade said. Do it now, and held off the figure as more blasts hit the shield. Hilary pressed her hand to the panel, and her skin lit up bright. The door clicked open. Just as the shield broke, and the armored figure stepped inside, Cade fired a stun round that slowed the figure down just enough for them to slip through the door and seal it behind them. They fell into the next room, breathing hard. It was darker here, but quiet for a moment. Hilary leaned against the wall, sliding down, her eyes half closed, her voice weak. I used too much. I cannot walk much farther. Cade knelt beside her and held her hand. We are almost there, he said. Just one more path, just one more try. She looked at him and smiled faintly. You believe in me, she said, even now, even after all this, and he nodded. I do. You are more than armor, more than code, more than memory. You are. Hilary and I will not let you fade outside the sealed door. The armored figure pounded with fists of steel, each hit shaking the walls, but inside, Cade and Hilary sat together, the glow of her skin lighting the shadows. Their hands locked, their eyes clear, their fear turning slowly into something stronger than fear, something that would not break even when everything else did. They had escaped the hunters for now, but the real battle was still ahead, and neither of them would face it alone. The room was silent, but not safe. The walls were thick but shaking with every strike from the armored figure. Outside, dust fell from the ceiling and the lights above flickered like dying stars. Hilary sat on the floor, her back against the cold metal, her skin pale and glowing faint, her breath slow and shallow, her eyes half open but still burning. With will, Cade knelt beside her, holding her hand, feeling the soft pulse in her wrist like a fading song. He could not let her fall, not now, not after all they had faced together. He looked around the chamber filled with old machines and broken wires. There had to be something. A way out, a tool, a weapon, anything that could give them more time. The door was sealed for now, but it would not hold forever. The enemy outside was not just strong, it was angry, it was hunting, not with orders but with fury, something personal, something dark. Hilary opened her eyes slowly and whispered his name, her voice weak but clear. I can feel it, she said. The bond, the link, it is inside you now. Cade did not understand at first, but she touched his chest gently where her core had rested before. She said, when you held the core, it marked you, it chose you now. We are connected not just in memory but in spirit. That is why I still breathe. That is why my mind is still whole. You gave me something I never had, a reason to live beyond the code. Beyond the war. He felt something shift inside, like warmth, like weight. He had never known the bond was more than words, more than trust. It was life, shared across flesh, and thought. Her pain was his, now her strength, also his. She reached for the broken pieces of her armor scattered on the ground and pulled one close. With shaking hands she said, I am not ashamed of who I was, but I do not need this to be strong anymore. One by one she removed the final parts, the shoulder guard, the chest plate, the heavy boots, until she wore only the soft inner layer, her skin marked with glowing lines of blue and silver, her body thin but powerful, made of strength, not metal. Cade looked away at first, unsure if he should see her like this, but she reached for him and said, do not hide. I am not hiding anymore. She stood slowly, legs trembling, arms reaching out to keep balance, but she stood taller than before, her face calm, her eyes bright. I am Hilary, she said, not armor, not soldier, not weapon, just Hilary. And I will not run anymore. Cade felt his chest tighten with pride and fear, and something deeper than both. Then a voice came from the far end of the room, old and rough. Someone else was there, hiding in the shadows. A figure stepped forward, limping, wrapped in fabric and dust, face covered with a mask. Hilary moved in front of Cade, out of instinct, but the figure raised a hand slowly. I mean no harm, it said. I am the last watcher. I stayed when the others fled. I saw your fight. I saw your truth. Cade raised his weapon, but the watcher did not flinch. It stepped closer and looked at Hilary, then at Cade, then back again. You touched the core. The watcher said, then, you are bonded, and if you are bonded, you are not just two, you are one. Hilary asked what that meant, and the watcher said, when a human and a warrior bond by core, they become a living key. You can open the gate at the top of this tower and send the last signal to every world still listening, but you must do it together. The ground shook again. The armored figure was still outside, still breaking the wall. Hilary looked at Cade and nodded. Let us end this, not with war, but with light. The watcher gave them a crystal small and bright place. This, in the heart of the console, it will give you power, but only if your bond is true, only if you trust. They climbed the stairs together, Hilary leaning on Cade, but walking stronger with each step. The top of the tower was broken open to the sky. The clouds above heavy and gray, the console waited in the center, light's dark screen cracked, but still alive. Hilary placed the crystal in the core slot, and Cade placed his hand beside hers. The console lit up, the sky flashed, and the bond between them glowed so bright it filled the room with Light, the armored figure broke through the final wall below, but it was too late. The message was already sent across the stars, not words of war, but words of peace, of truth, of hope. Ilari turned to Cade and smiled. No armor, no mask, no fear, she whispered. You gave me back my name, you gave me back my voice, and Cade smiled back, knowing the war inside her was over, and the one outside had just begun to end. The light rose from the tower like a star being born. The sky turned white, then blue, then deep gold. The clouds pulled away, and the wind carried the signal across the broken cities and fallen ships. It reached satellites and silent stations. It reached places where no one had spoken in years. Ilari stood beside Cade, her eyes glowing brighter than ever, her skin warm with energy, her breath strong and steady. The armor was gone, but she did not need it any more. Below them, the armored figure stopped. Mid-step, frozen by the pulse, it looked up with wide red eyes, its claws open, its chest heaving with shock. The signal had touched it. To not with commands, not with control, but with memory, with truth. It remembered what it had been before the armor. Before the silence, before the war. Cade stepped forward and held up his hand, not in anger, not in fear, but in peace. The figure dropped to one knee, its body shaking not from damage, but from something deeper. It had not known how to stop until now. It had not known there was another way. Ilari walked down the steps slowly, her bare feet light on the metal, her voice calm and strong. You were like me once, she said, and maybe you still are. If I can be free, then so can youth. Figure bowed its head and powered down. Its armor faded, its lights turned soft and dim. The war in its heart went quiet. Cade and Ilari stood together at the base of the tower, the wind blowing gently around them, the sky clearing above. More signals were returning, more lights blinking on. All around the world, the truth had moved through space, like a river touching every hidden place, and every forgotten soul. The Watcher stepped out from the shadows and nodded. Slowly, you did it, he said. You woke the world again. Now it is up to them what they choose next. Ilari looked at Cade and took his hand, their fingers laced with ease, like they were always meant to find each other. Her voice soft, but sure. Then we will stay and help. We will not walk away from what we began. They returned to the center of the chamber, where the final message still glowed on the screen. It was not long, it was not loud, it was simple. I am Ilari. I was built to fight, but I choose peace. I choose life. I was hidden inside armor. Now I stand with no shell and no chains, and I am not alone. Cade added his name beneath hers. With one touch, the message sealed into the memory stream forever, not as a report, not as an order, but as a story, one that would be heard again and again. Long after they were gone, the Watcher smiled behind the mask and stepped back into the tower, ready to guard the place where the war had ended and something new had begun. In the days that followed, people came from the ruins, warriors from both sides, soldiers without homes, children born in bunkers, all drawn by the light of the tower. They found Ilari and Cade, there not with weapons, not with commands, but with open hands and open hearts. Ilari taught them how to live without fear, how to move without armor, how to feel again. Cade taught them how to build, how to protect, not with hate, but with courage. One night, as the stars shined clear and sharp, Ilari sat beside Cade on the edge of the tower, her legs swinging over the side, her voice low but full of wonder. I never thought I would feel this, she said. The wind on my skin, the stars in my eyes, your hand in mine. I thought I would die sealed in cold metal, forgotten by all, even myself. Cade looked at her and smiled the same smile he gave her on the battlefield the first time she whispered for help. He said, you are not forgotten, and you never will be, not while I live, not while the stars still burn. Ilari leaned against him and closed her eyes, the bond between them quiet now, but strong as ever, not made of war, not made of code, but made of trust and truth. Some said later that the tower was sacred, that it held the power of peace. Others said it was a myth, that no warrior ever laid down their arms willingly, but those who came to the tower knew the truth. They saw the marks on Ilari's skin, the light in her eyes, the human who never let go, and they believed that war did not end in one day, and not in one voice, but it began to fade like smoke in the wind, like a shadow at dawn, and all because one human reached out with his hands and changed the heart of someone the world called enemy, but who became more than that, who became real, who became free. And in that small moment under that wide sky, something new was born. Something no one could ever put back into armor again, something no one could ever silence again. Not with machines, not with fear, not with war, because the humans' hands had touched something deeper than armor. They had touched a soul and made it shine.